A little girl clutched her mother's arm, her voice trembling, her eyes wet with fear. "Please, don't hurt us," she begged, her small frame shaking. But in that very moment, the door swung open. Her father, a man of power and wealth, stormed in, his voice echoing like thunder. "Enough!" The room was thick with fear, and the air seemed to tighten around every breath. A small girl, no more than 7, pressed her hands together, trembling as her plea spilled out of her lips like broken glass. "Please, don't hurt us." Her eyes, wide and tearful, darted toward the looming shadow above her. The silence that followed was unbearable, stretching into a void of dread. And then it shattered. The heavy front door burst open. A tall figure stepped inside, his voice carrying the weight of thunder itself. "Enough!" The man's presence filled the space, and with him came a sudden shift in the air, as though justice itself had entered the room. This man was no ordinary father. He was a man whose name carried influence, whose fortune could buy castles, yet whose heart was scarred from battles fought in silence. He had once been a soldier, long before the suits, the boardrooms, and the wealth. His scars were hidden beneath fine clothes, but his eyes bore the quiet pain of wars that never left him. Years before, he had marched across deserts, not in pursuit of wealth but in defense of lives. He had seen brothers fall beside him, had carried their weight in silence, and had promised himself that his family would never know such fear. But tonight, that promise was being tested. The girl's tears reminded him of nights in the field, when children cried in villages torn by conflict. He could almost smell the smoke of burnt fields, feel the grit of sand in his teeth, hear the silence after gunfire, a silence far heavier than any noise. He had returned home from those days determined to build a fortress of safety around those he loved. Yet now, standing in his own house, he realized danger had found a way in. The intruder in his home was not armed with weapons, but with cruelty. His power came from the fear he inflicted, his dominance fueled by the weakness of others. And yet, as he faced the girl's father, his authority withered. For there is a strength in silent dignity that no cruelty can rival. The millionaire father stood still, his jaw tight, his silence louder than any insult. The room seemed to wait for him. Even the intruder, bold only moments ago, faltered under the weight of his gaze. The mother, clutching her daughter close, dared not speak, yet her eyes glistened with both fear and hope. The neighbors, drawn by the noise, gathered outside. They did not intervene, not at first. Some whispered, some shook their heads, but none stepped forward. The silence of the bystanders pressed on like a moral wound, proof of how often people watch injustice unfold, hoping someone else will act. The man who had once been a soldier did not need to shout. He had learned in war that the strongest commands are often spoken in quiet resolve. His voice was steady, calm, and unshakable as he finally spoke. "This ends now." The intruder laughed, a sharp sound meant to mock. "And who are you to stop me?" The father stepped closer, his presence towering not by wealth or by title, but by the unshakable truth in his eyes. "I am the man who stands between you and them. That is all you need to know." In that moment, something changed. The neighbors outside, who had been silent, began to step closer to the windows. One man removed his cap, holding it against his chest in quiet respect. Another whispered to his son, "Watch closely. This is what true strength looks like." The girl's sobs softened, her small hands tightening around her mother's sleeve as though holding on to hope itself. The intruder tried to hold his ground, but his power began to dissolve, as if the weight of every silent witness pressed against him. For cruelty thrives in shadows, but in the light of dignity, it shrinks. The father did not move with haste. His steps were deliberate, like a soldier advancing toward an enemy line. Every movement carried the memory of those who had once marched beside him. Every breath carried the silent promise, "Never again will I let fear rule this home." And then came the moment that would be remembered. The father stood tall, his voice low but cutting through the silence. True wealth is not measured by gold or power. It is measured by the safety of those you love. The words struck harder than any blow. The intruder faltered, his defiance crumbling. The strength he thought he held evaporated, leaving him exposed, powerless before the quiet storm of a man who refused to bow. The mother, tears streaming down her cheeks, whispered words her daughter would carry forever. "See, my love, real strength doesn't shout, it protects." The bystanders outside began to stand straighter. One woman placed her hand over her heart, while another clasped her hands together in silent prayer. A boy, barely old enough to understand, whispered, "That's what a hero looks like." The intruder, cornered not by fists but by truth, lowered his gaze. His voice, once sharp, cracked with defeat. He stumbled back, muttering excuses, but no one listened. The power shift was complete. The father's silence had won. As the man retreated from the house, the neighbors outside parted like waves, watching as cruelty slinked away into the night. No one cheered, no one jeered. They simply stood in silence, a tribute more powerful than applause. The father closed the door and turned to his family. He knelt before his daughter, brushing a tear from her cheek with the gentleness of a man who had seen too much pain to allow any more. "You're safe now," he whispered, his voice breaking only for her ears. And then the words that would echo far beyond that house, words the neighbors would repeat, words that would live in the girl's memory. Respect is not demanded by fear. It is earned by love. The child buried her face against his chest, and in that embrace, years of silent battles found their peace. Outside, the neighbors dispersed, but they carried something with them. They had not just witnessed a man defend his family. They had witnessed the quiet power of dignity, the unshakable strength of a protector who did not need to raise his hand to win. In the days that followed, whispers spread through the community, not of wealth, not of power, but of a father who showed that true authority comes from love, not fear. And for those who had stood silently by, there was a lesson etched into their hearts. Silence can make one complicit, but silence used with purpose can move mountains. The story of that night became a quiet legend, a reminder passed from one family to another, that when cruelty raises its voice, dignity does not need to shout back. It only needs to stand. In a world where too many confuse power with control, this story reminds us of something deeper. True strength is not in shouting, not in forcing fear, but in standing firm with love and dignity. What would you have done that night? Would you have stood silent, or would you have stood beside him? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know where in the world you are watching from. If this story moved you, subscribe for more tales that honor the quiet, unseen heroes among us, because sometimes the strongest voice is silence.